As winter approaches us, we're going to run into a lot of issues with our cars. Some things we're not going to want to work on, especially if you have to work outside, you're not in a heated garage. These things are an opportunity to you. So it's best to get your maintenance done before winter hits. And we're going to start right now with the battery. If you're having any kind of battery issues, i.e. slow cranking, cold cranking, your lights dim while you're trying to start it at an excessive rate, leaving your GPS plugged in way too long, leaving it plugged in overnight, and you have to jump it off the next day. Any of these circumstances are going to take a toll on the battery. And once that cold winter weather hits, it's going to be game over. So let's take care of that battery before it gets too cold and you don't want to touch your car. Now, we always want to make sure we're wearing gloves and eye protection while under the hood, and especially working on batteries. You do not want anything to explode or happen while working on this battery and accidentally get acid into your eyes or skin. Now, keep in mind, we always want to disconnect the negative post first. For situations exactly like this, the ratchet head is touching the metal hold down of it. If we were to do this with the positive side, which happens to be sticking up, but anyways, if it happened to touch the positive post to this, the body, this battery hold down, which can sometimes be part of the battery ground, you would see a nice arc, and it might even weld itself to it, which makes it even more difficult to break it loose. And there would be chances of electric shock, which is very hazardous. So we have rubber gripped gloves to avoid any kind of shock and protect our hand. Now, before I do a voltage draw test and try to test the integrity of this battery, I'm going to make sure this little guy has a full charge. So I disconnected the battery, I hooked up the negative lead, and then I have the positive lead hooked up to my charger before plugging it in. This is important. Sometimes when you're hooking it up, it might be plugged in, and you could cause a high spark, which could ignite this battery. Now, being as I'm a little short on time, and I'd like to charge this in roughly an hour, I hooked it up to 12 volt at a 30 amp charge. So within about an hour to an hour and a half, this little boy should be fully charged, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. Now in this series, I'm hooking up the negative terminal and then the positive terminal. Now, this doesn't change anything on amperage. However, sometimes you might add a negative sign to the amperage readings. And this is what I'm talking about. Right here, we're going to see a nice jump of amperage as we try to connect it. You can kind of see little spit sparks as I'm connecting this terminal alligator clamp to the battery top post. Now, those sparks sometimes can fume hazardous gases that vent out of this battery. Now, unfortunately, this particular fuse buddy is reading zeroed out, which is strange to me. Usually there's at least some kind of draw visible. Now, either this fuse buddy is reading accurately, or it just does not go down to the milliamps that I need to test. Milliamps would be 3 decimal places after the decimal point. So right now, when I first hooked it up, I'll show you quickly. It will jump up, light off of here. So I know that circuit's complete. I watched it jump and spike up to roughly 0.6 amps or 600 milliamps. Now, we're looking for 50 milliamps, or I'm gonna hook up my lead here and check what my multimeter reads now after I replace the fuse. So it jumps up to 100 milliamps on connection, and we're dropping down to roughly 15 milliamps and slowly dropping. So we want to let this car sit for at least 10 minutes. On others, you might have to deal with 20 minutes sitting and waiting until it drops down all the way. But we're already at 7 milliamps. So I mean, at this point in time, I'm just going to have to say that I most likely have an issue with the battery. Now I got the positive lead hooked up to the positive battery terminal and the negative lead hooked up to the negative battery terminal. And right here we can see I have a steady voltage of 12.53 volts. A brand new battery, spanking new, should have about 12.56. They say an average of 12 volts. As long as you're above the threshold of 12, you have a pretty good battery. They count cells, so a battery has 6 cells. You're talking about 2.1 volts per cell. So we're trying to look as close as 12.6 as possible. At 12.53, we're doing fine. I'm going to continue going the vehicle and crank this over, and I'm going to use range hold. I'm going to use the min-max function. And now what this is this is going to lock in our voltage right here at 12.53. So once the vehicle starts, we should see it, as long as the alternator is doing as it should, we should see this shoot up above 14 volts. And our lotus value is going to be the voltage that's stored while cranking. We don't want to see this drop below 10.1 volts. On some vehicles, we're looking at about 11.1 volts. So hopefully, if everything shows up, our battery is good and ready to go. Upon turning the key on, it went from 12.53 down to 12.28. As the modules start to activate, the CD changer's going through all the CDs. And while it's doing this, we're going to go ahead and crank on it. And we're going to watch to see how low the voltage drops. Now, unfortunately, I don't know if you saw that, but I caught it. That voltage actually dropped down to 9.8 volts, which is below what I'd hoped to see. It's quite possible we have a weak cell in this battery. Now, with this min-max function, I can just verify that. I hit the button first time, and we go up to the maximum voltage, which is 14.48. That's our alternator doing its job there. And go down to 9.4 volts, so close to 9. So even after putting this battery to a full charge, I'm going to have to condemn it and say we need to replace the battery. So here we are, we just got our brand new Superstart battery from O'Reilly's here, and here's a brand new battery with a 12.64 voltage reading. So I'm going to go ahead and do the min-max function and see how much this battery drops while I crank on it now. Move to the window, start the car. Key on, it stops to 12.3, just as the last one did. Oh, that started much more quicker. Up at 14.3. Charging system. So we're stabilized back at 12.62 volts. I'm going to hit the min-max button. 15.36 peak charging. 10.76. Now that I'm happy with. It's well above. It's 1.3 volts above our 9.4, which we had. 10.76, and the vehicle cranked and started quickly. Today we saw how to test, charge, and do a draw test on your battery to see if it's your battery or you have other issues behind it. Sometimes it's not just simple as replacing battery and you have to go start pulling fuses, which is something we did not have to do today, but I can show you if you want. Click subscribe and follow, and text me back with your comments, and I'll try to keep up and post any videos you want to see.